So Jana, it's come to this. Here we are in the studio. You were just a mom and you noticed stuff going on. You were a professional. You made a challenge. So many things have come out of that challenge. You've got the Women's Council. You've got all the initiatives you've taken on. Most of them have been successful and you've got a lot of support, but you've also had the other side of that notoriety. That's the normal process that a lot of people have been through, and we're going to talk about all that today. So when was the first time you started twigging that there's something going on? Were you always a conspiracy theorist? I suppose, let me ask you, put it like this. Growing up, what was your feeling about the world? I mean, did the world seem like a safe place? Did it seem like you were in a society that was trustworthy?
Yeah, there's a few parts to that question. So I'll start with the first one that stuck out to me is, have you always been a conspiracy theorist? Yeah. And I don't actually even today class myself as a conspiracy theorist. I like to think of myself as a critical thinker. And when did I start questioning things? So I started questioning things in, I suppose it was around March, April 2020, during the COVID, I call it the COVID era. Yeah. And I did watch TV a little bit at the time, and I haven't had one since that I watch. And I heard the news around all the different countries saying the same thing at the same time. And the phrases that were really pulling at our empathy and our heartstrings, like for the greater good and, you know, flatten the curve, etc. From my previous experience working 20 years in multinationals, I had to look at a lot of data to make decisions. We had to manage by fact, not just intuition. So that I looked at I think it was the health surveillance data, which was all the COVID data on the deaths, which after that they stopped publishing. But I looked at the average age of death, the recovery rate, the number of comorbidities, how many by age group who was affected by this virus. Yeah. And when I looked at the data and used the facts and data for me contradicted what the television was saying, what the government, the media and everyone was saying. And then along came the censorship and the misinformation people on all the tech platforms. In decisions in my life now, particularly since becoming a mother, I use my intuition, my mama instinct a lot more than I would have. But in my career in the past, we were required, before spending money, making decisions, organizational changes, whatever it was, is to use the facts and data. And when I looked at the facts and data that were presented by the health surveillance, the HSE, that contradicted what I saw on the telly and what the media was telling us and the government and everyone else. So I started to dig in and I realized something doesn't look right here. And then I started wondering, is this about compliance? Is this about control? And then they started pushing the injections, that everything will be normal if everybody gets this. But when I looked at the data and said, well, this isn't a virus no more than a cold or flu that will kill us. Why? What's the motivation and intention in pushing this on everyone? So I started kind of peeling back the layers of that onion. And ever since 2020, I've done that with the various issues that have come up, using the data, but also now, since becoming a mom in 2015, I've been using a lot more my mama intuition as well as the data.
And it was great when people like yourself started to appear on the scene. You know, we needed competent people, we needed professional people, because so many of us were angry people, were contrarians who expressed the dissatisfaction. But it was so good when the professionals started to arrive on the scene, because there was a level of competency, people who could be taken more seriously. And I think that really happened with you. Trust and confidence has been built up. You know, you've definitely got momentum with the Women's Council, and we have to talk about that. But really, it's just to start off with, it's about yourself, about what was the process, because you had to come out, make public statements, which you did very well, and you came out with great initiatives as well, and you got momentum, people got behind you. But I think for yourself, it wasn't easy. You have a family situation, you had a work situation. Suddenly you were challenging a lot of the values and institutions that you worked for? Or perhaps, I don't know, you'll tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know much about your work.
I will.
But
So I'll tell you about my work. I'll jump in there because I've actually been out of the multinationals and out of the workforce for 10 years, and I've been a full-time mom for just over 8 years.
Yeah.
So I was out of the multinational workforce that I was in, working in banking. It's been over 10 years, and I've been a full-time mom, and I'm starting a second career sort of later in life. So there was a few years being out of the workforce before the COVID came, before I woke up, and being a mum. So I haven't been part of that kind of workforce and had to leave. I haven't had to face the decision whether to kind of have my morals challenged with where I'm working, because that was many, many years ago.
we're going to deal with accusations here as well, aren't we? And one of them is that, you were working in banking, and I don't really know what aspect of banking you were working with. And I probably wouldn't even understand it either if you were to tell me. But it is something that people were kind of going, there's a whole load of things that may be uncomfortable about this. So what I'd like to ask you is, tell us something about when you were growing up. Like, did you feel that you could trust the world you were part of? Like, did you trust society? Did you trust the institutions? What was your attitude to the environment you were in, or the country you were living in? Yeah. In other words, were you somebody who felt that you could trust the government, or were you someone who always had an instinctive suspicion of it, or hostility to it?
Yeah, great question. I grew up in a very small town in rural Maine, on the coast of Maine, and I grew up on a mountaintop and didn't have
That's right up there on the east coast.
Right up on the Canadian border, surrounded by the mountain and the sea.
Yeah.
And I trusted the world. I trusted my neighbours. I trusted my family. I had a beautiful childhood. I didn't really know much about the government because I was living on a mountaintop. We lived sort of not officially off-grid, but we had solar power, we had wind power before it became this green agenda thing, and we grew our own food, and I lived a very abundant life, but also probably sheltered from the ways of the world and the corruption, and that taught me to be very trusting.
Yeah.
So that's one thing probably to this day in my adult life that I struggle with, is how people have a lack of trust, because my natural instinct is to see the good in people, and the optimism and the glass is half full, because that's what I was raised with throughout my childhood.
I think that's beautiful, and I absolutely love that. I think that's how every young girl should grow up, and I think that's how every government should be, trustworthy. I love that about your story, because you didn't come from this angry place. One of the things that I've seen, whether it's true or not, is that you were working in the Department of Banking, dealt with collecting. Tell me more. What were you doing in the bank?
I have a nearly 20-year career in banking. So I started after studying pre-med and waiting tables, and I've raked blueberries, and I've worked in cafes. I did anything and everything in my town. And a call center opened up in my town, and when I was about 20, I got a part-time job doing telemarketing, planning to go and finish to become a doctor, physical therapist or whatnot. And I climbed up the ladder and made a career for myself up in the call center realm. So the banking that I worked in was a call center environment. So I worked up from being a call center agent into management, into senior management. So I ran lots of different large departments. I did customer service, I did collections, learning and leadership development, everything over those 20 years. And then I was made redundant after, as one bank buys out another. I got a redundancy, moved back from Leitrim back into Dublin Meath area, worked for another multinational for a year, and then got married and had kids and decided to be a full-time mummy until going back to the workforce now, being self-employed.
And isn't that what you'd wish for any child? To grow up, use their talents in a positive way. And like you say, you were a trusting person. Would you have had a sense that you were there to build your country and build your nation and build your economy and all those kind of things Would you have felt like that?
Absolutely. I was and I still consider I'm American, born and raised in America. I've lived here 20 years, so I have loyalty, always will have loyalty to my home state, my home country where my family still live, but also to Ireland where my 2 kids were born and where I've been here 20 years. So I feel that wherever I've lived, in whatever town, village, city, country, my job is to do the best I can to make it better. That's just what's been ingrained in me since I was a young child, is do good for your neighbours, do good for your community. And, I learned from a very young age, I was sent off to rake blueberries. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, as a young child, I was bent over in the fields raking blueberries all day in the blistering sun. I was the only girl on the crew, got picked up at sunrise, and I learned very quickly that the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. Anything you want and any change you want to make, you have to work for it.
Yeah. Contrast that you had to make where you are all of a sudden challenging all those things that you've worked for, all those things that you've believed in to some degree. And was there a sense of disillusionment? Was there a sense of mistrust? Did that creep into the way you felt about the world and felt about the authorities that we were all supposed to obey and trust and have confidence in?
Yeah, I think when you have that awakening, it's not a comfortable place to be. So in 2020, when I woke up to that media tells lies, the government isn't always out for our best interest. We're moving in from what I thought was a democratic place into a very much an authoritarian totalitarianism state. When you have that awakening, it's very, very uncomfortable. But once you see these things, you can't unsee it. So you have a choice: either address it and try to spread the awareness, try to make the world better, or ignore it. And a wise person said to me recently that the only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing.
Yeah.
And putting your head out there and speaking up isn't easy, but I would find it a lot harder, especially as a mom to 2 small kids, to do nothing.
And so that's where you ended up developing the Natural Women's Council. Was the Natural Women's Council the first initiative you headed up, or was there something,
Before starting the Natural Women's Council, which I can talk to shortly about how that came about, I worked with all different groups that I saw doing things, and friends that I had known and trusted. The Irish Education Alliance, some great teachers, Lawyers for Justice Ireland, a great group of a handful of lawyers, Parents' Rights Alliance, did some hold the lines on the road. Yeah. So I just I didn't really start up anything. I just said, hey, let's go and do this. And, we did anything from, letter campaigns. We did hold the lines outside schools on the masks. We passed out thousands of flyers about the different things we didn't agree with. So I never really had started something, but I just worked with a lot of people. And I suppose what inspired me to start my own Natural Women's Council was I saw that working with a team is much stronger than working on your own. The power of the team, the different insights, the different thoughts, ideas and skill sets.
I think it's time to talk about what you do, and what you've done very successfully, which is the Natural Women's Council and your challenge to gender ideology in schools. And I think you're the expert on this. There's nothing I can tell you about it, so you have to tell us.
Yeah. First of all, I'll never claim to be an expert. Every day is a learning day. And second of all, I never like to think of myself as a leader of a movement. Before I talk about the Natural Women's Council, I'll just clarify that, because I've seen a lot of things in the out there in the media about, how did Jana nominate herself as a leader? Why is this American in Ireland saying she's the leader? But just to clarify, I've never nominated myself as a leader. I don't want to be the leader. And I see that in any movement, if someone declares themselves as a leader, it actually can be detrimental, because they create this follow me mentality and let me be the savior. And what that does to all the other people in the country, all the other men and women, is it nearly minimizes their inspiration and motivation to get up and do something if they think, oh, that person's the leader, they're the savior, I'll follow them. So I don't claim to be, and I don't want to be a leader of any movement. I want to help inspire and give others the tools to do that. So that's my point on that before I go into the Natural Women's
Council. Well, I will say
Council.
this to you, and I'll interrupt you a bit on that, Jana, I hope you'll forgive me, is yes, I don't think we're looking for authority. I don't think, from what you're saying, you're looking for authority. But I will say this, that without leadership being provided in some way, momentum doesn't generate. And I think that has happened. You know, I think what you're talking about is not a top-down form of institution, or not a top-down form of leadership, but a people's movement type, where we build up trust and confidence in each other, and we develop momentum, and we take initiatives and we make them work. And
yeah, exactly. And the Natural Women's Council, so how it started and what we've done with that is, it was actually July 7th, 7/7 of 2022, and I was on the phone with Siobhan, one of the lawyers for Justice Ireland. I remember that day, it was sunny, I was hanging out the washing, and she said, you know, the government's looking to erase the word woman from the Maternity Protection Acts under Article 10, 11 and 12, erase woman and her to be inclusive of transgender men who breastfeed or what have you. Would you go down maybe to Leinster House, organise a few of your women from your group to go and stand with a few signs? And I said, absolutely, let's do something about that. I wasn't aware that women would be erased. So we did an assembly outside Leinster House on 7/7, and luckily that decision was reversed. We had a good crowd there. And how the Natural Women's Council came about is, I had done a town hall in my village in April 2022. Yeah. And there was a good turnout, nearly 200 people at short notice in our town hall there in Ratoath. And I talked about the WHO treaty and the housing referendum, which was new to most people, and many considered it a conspiracy. And there was a gentleman who attended the town hall who had recently sold one of his businesses. He had a great skill set, networking, building websites, skill set that I didn't have. And he said to me, well, when you do this event at Leinster House, why don't you launch a women's group? And so actually it was suggested by a man, and men certainly do have their place, an important place in society. So I took it and ran with it, and he had already bought the domain womenscouncil.ie. But having met with the 3 or 4 women who started this with me, we said, actually, we'd like to manage it in-house, not have a man involved or any web designer. We'll do it ourselves as a group of women. So I met with this individual to say, you know, thanks for buying the domain and offering to build the website, but we're going to do it on our own. And we've actually changed the name to Natural Women's Council, which I love more than just womenscouncil.ie. And Natural Women's Council, well, we are natural born women, and we always will be women. But secondly, is most of the women in the Natural Women's Council believe in the benefits of natural health, and we treat ourselves and our families very effectively with natural health. So it really fit in well, and that's the reason for that name change. I saw that questioned recently in the media.
Yeah, it does, and it's all part of people with skills, people with expertise coming and providing us with skills and ability to do more. You know, we are making a challenge to the entire institutions of the state that are well funded, as well as all the NGOs. We're up against a huge machine, and we need some of this ability to technological ability to organize ourselves, get our message out there. And we're not going to do that without people who have some ability and experience in all these things. And there are people who do have these experiences and who do have this expertise and who are waking up to all this and very much want to be part of it all. Mm-hmm. But everybody has to find their way in. Everybody has to build up trust and confidence within the wider group of challengers, if you like, and that's not easy, is it?
It's not easy. And regarding the Natural Women's Council, we're a group, in our small group, about 25 women, and we come from all different backgrounds, all different, you know, there's a few Americans on there, there's Irish, there's English, there's a good group of women. We have lawyers, we have doctors, psychologists, mummies, we have people that work in the health system, people that work in the school system. So the skill set is amazing, but the ambition is just fantastic. These are all women who do it volunteer. In between myself, I have 2 small children. We do it in between school runs, in between jobs, in between, you know, some of us are also back in college. And they're volunteers that do this because they want to make the world better for the women and children of Ireland, and ultimately the family unit. We don't exclude men and boys either. So it's really just a fantastic group of skill sets and good, honest people.
It is. And how was it for you, for the first time you stepped out into the public, I suppose you'd call it a protest. What would you have called it when you stood outside the Dáil and had your sound system there? And how first did you feel about stepping up there and beginning to speak? Any opposition that might have been around? You know, how did that all work for you, and how did you cope with it, do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, about a protest, I always make sure I don't call any event that I do a protest, because for me a protest is very much in the child ego state. It's my son protesting, I don't want to go to bed now, or I want ice cream before dinner. So we don't protest for the rights we already have, we assert the rights. So we call them assemblies or information sessions. It's really to get information out, to let people know the rights that we already have. So I don't call them protests at all. Peaceful assemblies, direct action assemblies, or whatever. How did it feel? So that first time I went out, July 7th, 2022, and did the speech, it felt natural from my previous experience with my employment and my career. I would have had to do a lot of public speaking with large crowds, and being a senior manager, I would have had to, get people on board, help people collaborate, and tell the story and help people understand what the mission is and the intention behind it. So it felt very natural, but for this, because it was something I felt very passionate about, the erasure of the word woman when I have a daughter, it was just, I got up there and I felt the fire of this has to be done, I have to speak, I'm speaking for my daughter. And then I remember when the government decided, it came out that they were not going to erase the word woman. I woke up that morning and I saw my daughter, who was I think 6.5 or 7 at the time, gave her a big hug and said, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, keep talking about that, because I'm not going to know what that really means. My feeling is I'm better off stepping back from trying to understand. I mean, I'm married nearly 30 years. I have 2 daughters, and I still don't really know what's going on with them all on a personal level. I'm a little bit emotionally retarded. Maybe it's just being a man, maybe it's just me, but I think that you should really let rip and just say what the Women's Council means to you. I'm pushing you a bit further on, how you see this assault, really, this attack on women. Is it an attack? Does it feel like an attack?
It does feel like an attack. I look at what's happening around us, and everything from, it started the erasing of the word, trying to erase woman, the chief of the household, the mother, the mother of the household, erase that divine femininity, erase that. How can that possibly be erased, and why would they do such a thing? And then I look at sports. I feel that my daughter, who will be playing sports potentially in the future, they're allowing someone who identifies as a woman to play against a girl on the field, and that is unfair and it's unsafe. I look at prisons. I look at letting a male prisoner into the woman's prison, which is again unsafe and a violation of that woman's rights. To have, like, the Barbie Kardashian case in Ireland was a big one. So I look at the violation. I look at erasing woman and allowing someone to identify as a woman to push us out of the way. And that's when I think that all women should put their feet firmly on the ground and say, we are not going to be pushed out of the way. We are not going to be silenced. We're not going away. And I think for someone like myself who has a daughter, I feel that extra strength in me, because I'm fighting for her future when she grows up, not to have her erased or competing against a man, or hopefully not in a prison, but I don't want a man in her space in the toilets. When I drop her off at the shopping mall when she's 15, I don't want her to go to a toilet and have a man follow her into the toilet because he says he's a woman.
And as fathers, we have the same kind of protective instinct, but we can't do it without we can do it without the understanding of the women, and it often goes wrong. We kind of think we're trying to do good, we're trying to, but we're not doing it quite right, or sometimes our efforts don't meet with approval for reasons we don't understand. And I think that's why it's so important that the women say what they want, and I think that's what you're talking about there. It's great to get a clear message, as much as possible, a woman's perspective on all this. I mean, it is horrifying. These are real men in women's spaces, and that gives us a level of deep discomfort as parents. I suppose it's great that you're doing what you're doing, that you're a spearhead, you're taking a stand that other people can support. People like myself can support, who may not understand the issues as well as you do. You know, that's very valuable. And just like the men can sometimes think that the whole thing seems to go to mush, it seems sometimes when we sincerely make an effort to stand for something, that also meets all kinds of misunderstanding. You know, that you get called a CIA agent, you get called all kinds of stuff, and that your sincere intent, which comes across to me as a sincere intent, gets misconstrued. But I don't think that happened straight away, did it? I think you had I think you had a kind of honeymoon period.
Yeah, I did. For the first couple of years, from 2020 till 2022, like I said, I worked with a lot of different individuals or groups, and we were, doing our own kind of campaigning, whether it's letters or placards at roundabouts or leafleting or whatever. And the criticism probably started, I would say, when I did the town hall, April 2022. I had a large group in Meath of about 65 people on this WhatsApp group, and we did a lot of active work together. And when I did that town hall in April 2022, which was I must say, it was very well done and professional. I had my slides and I didn't have any funding for it. I actually got the hall for free. I put flyers in every shop window in 5 different towns to fill the room. It was very much roll the sleeves up and do it, but it came out really well. And people started saying, she must be really heavily funded to have pulled that event off when it didn't cost anything. So you had that criticism started, and then speaking outside Leinster House on 7/7/2022. I started getting criticism then from the media.
Yeah.
The media started really using those labels that we hear, the far right, bigot, transphobic, extremist, and those continued to get worse, to propagandize those terms into the brains of the public. And then you started having people turn against you who were meant to be also on the right side of history and in the freedom or the truth movement to make the world better. And I think that's the most difficult criticism to understand, is people who are meant to be on side, even people that you've worked alongside with over the years.
I think so. And what we're seeing is people who are competent, people who have experience, people who are able to do things well and succeed. Why would we not want people to succeed? The path to success means including people who have ability and competence. I remember giving you messages because we were in contact about that day, and I remember giving you messages and saying, Jana, do you realise you've got broad support in Dublin? That's really precious, because I had seen for 2 years, particularly Dublin, was very problematic in terms of fractiousness and turmoil going on. And so I don't know, the messages probably sounded a little bit too, I wonder, I often think, did I say too much to Jana? But what I really meant was, you're doing great, this is fantastic, and I hope that people build together around the campaign. And I wanted to see it happen, but I knew eventually that you were going to meet challenges from our own side. And, I was hoping this would solve the whole problem, that we'd be able to get this people's movements going, everybody would jump on board and, bring in their talents and their ability, and we'd crack it together, But that's not quite what happened. I mean, we can deal with some of the accusations here. Not only is there the attacks from the state, there is the attacks from our own crowd, and there's the attacks from the NGOs and the others as well. So which was the most prominent attack from your point of view?
Yeah, I I think before I talk about any of the attacks, the thing that kind of boggled my mind the most, and for all of the data I could look at and all the intuition I could pull from, what I still struggle with is, what is the motivation and the intention of the individuals or the NGOs or the people who are attacking people like myself or small grassroots groups that we work with. So there has to be, every action has a motivation and an intention behind it. So the biggest struggle for me, really, to kind of summarize all of the attacks, particularly from the ones who are meant to be on our side, is what is the motivation and the intention of those attacks? Because when you look at those attacks, attacking someone like me, a mum of two who started a grassroots organization, who in between school runs passes out leaflets, I would ask the people attacking, do they really feel that I'm the enemy of the state here? Yeah. Am I, Jana Lunden, the enemy of the state? Or is there actually another enemy, such as the global entities that our own government are answering to now, linked to we all know about the WEF at this point and Agenda 2030. So I don't understand the reasoning behind it, because it causes division, it causes a lot of confusion, anxiety, worry, and concern. So if I look at those things that is caused by people meant to be on our side attacking, they're causing the same 5 feelings and emotion that the regime attempt to cause through the propaganda from the government, the media. So they're doing the job of the regime by attacking people, unless they really feel that I am the enemy of the state. So the most boggling thing about all the attacks is the motivation and intention.
People have invested a lot of time and effort in building up a challenge to the state, and those people may feel that they have the expertise, the knowledge, the profile to do this. And here you are, being successful in everything, clearly quite competent at doing this stuff, and that people feel threatened that their vision, that you're challenging their vision for how the vision is going to go.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was always told as a child there's plenty of room on the playground for everyone, and if we're all fighting against the same, the government, which is now trying to impose policy versus invite opinion, we all want to have our opinions go up and to shape the policy and future for our children. So if we all have that as the vision and aim, I do struggle to see that, but I suppose it comes down to, there used to be the term egotistical. This sounds very like me-gotistical. It goes from egotist to me-gotist.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for me to understand, because what I do has nothing to do about attention, because a lot of it that you get is not good. I've been physically attacked as well, which I can talk about. I've had threats to myself, threats to my family. The attention that we get when we speak up and stand up, the RTE primetime attempted hit piece on myself to discredit me, it's not good attention. So, for me, it's not about attention. It certainly doesn't make you any money, doesn't get you much love. For what I do, and my truth is making the world better for my children. So I do struggle to see why, if we're all resisting the evil, why we can't all resist together, and there's room on the playground for everybody.
What you're talking about there is a people's movement.
Correct.
You're talking, and the leadership profile idea that I suggested to you is a top-down way of doing things. So I think that there is a conflict between two visions. One is for a ideologically driven solution, and another one which is a practically based solution. I think that it's my own opinion that that's one of the reasons why such conflict develops, is that people are essentially competing to lead this movement and see you as a threat to, or as a competitor. What I assume you would say is that I'm not competing. I'm not competing to lead this. I'm part of a, like you say, plenty of space in the playground model of taking this on. And there is a conflict there between top-down authoritarian approaches to things and the people developing a broad, I suppose, populist, maybe I'm getting that word wrong, but certainly I think that we've got broad support for, do you feel we've broad support amongst the people for, say, your position on indoctrination in schools, or gender ideology, queer theory being taught in schools?
Absolutely. I feel that we have so much support, because once people get the information, we launched on January 26th of this year, we launched the library book campaign and also the SPHE curriculum campaign outside Leinster House. And from when we launched it, the support, once we started getting the information out, and we didn't do it in a tyrannical, let me lead, this is how you have to think way. It was, here's the information. We've gotten out over 200,000 leaflets. We've done over 6 events this year. We've been in media. We have done letter campaigns, email campaigns. We've done all this work. And it's once people get the information and they look at it and they say, this doesn't make sense. You know, this isn't, I believe the government is pushing policy from the top down rather than from the bottom up with public opinion. So for gender ideology, for example, the question I would ask is, were there thousands of parents up and down the country asking for gender ideology to be brought in school? Were there thousands of parents saying, we want sexually explicit library books to be put in the children's section? Or were there thousands of millions of people in Ireland saying, we want mass amounts of unvetted immigrants to come in? Or, for example, hate speech. Grift did a recent research study that showed that 73% of people in Ireland don't want the hate speech law, yet the government says, people want it, people want this, people want gender ideology. So who's driving this and who wants it? And once we get that information out through all of our grassroots groups that we work with 4 groups in collaboration, people get the information and we put it in a very factual way, very easy to read way. We speak very rationally and they look at it and say, actually, I don't agree with this. So it's just speaking to them in those conversations or getting out the information that's gotten us amazing support, amazing.
And success as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have pushed back against the machine, the NGOs, the philanthropists, the government policy, the WEF, the WHO, the UN, and on it goes. Just us people waking up out of our ordinary lives, our ordinary careers, and becoming a force. And we have pushed back on hate speech. The government has pulled in on the cash, and we're winning over and over again, because I think that the government knows that this is a spin exercise and we have a lot of support. And I think that this brings me to another aspect of the conflict within the psychology. What motivates people to challenge their own? And I think one of them is we have a sense that there's so many, that we have broad support, but we don't have authority. Then we get to a place where our guys rise up and we challenge authority, and then we get to the place of taking hold of authority. All of a sudden we change. It appears that we've betrayed our objectives. And it happens over and over again. We see people, for example, the latest, Giorgia Meloni seems to have, in Italy, seems to have rolled back on a lot of the things that she said she was going to do. All of a sudden she was talking about the passports and the vaccines. Then she's accepting a level of migration which everybody said, you know, this is what we put you in for, you know, not to keep it the same or raise it even. So it's, to me, I think a lot of the activists on the ground are looking at the likes of yourself and saying, these guys are going to betray us, you know, and they're kind of looking, it kind of nearly gives them a sense of certainty, because we're not privy to the agenda of the WEF and UN and all the rest of it. We're guessing what they're trying to do. We're seeing what they're trying to do and we don't like it. So we're making a challenge. We're gaining momentum. But people like yourself, Jana, get a groundswell of support. And so these guys are going, but they're going to betray us, you know, and they're looking now at this point to find weakness, you know, to scrutinize everybody and say, you know, we've got to really be very particular about these people. We have to put them through a trial of fire. The guys, they have to be sincere, they have to be pure, they have to be true. So if people can see something which they think they've got on you, it nearly gives them certainty. You know, it's almost comforting that there's something wrong with Jana, you know, and that, okay. And this seems to be a thing with activists, that we're so afraid of betrayal. We're so expecting of betrayal, and we're looking so hard to find it that we may actually stop people from developing the momentum that we need to get to succeed. Am I making sense to you there?
Yeah, I'd like to hone in on the word betrayal.
Yeah.
And back to what I said is, I don't want to be the leader, the nominated leader, or the one, you know, being the one to lead any sort of movement at all. So I think for people that feel betrayal, they're in the wrong mindset, because betrayal means they're trusting someone else to lead, someone else to be the one to make the change. They need to actually park the betrayal and say, it's up to me to make the change, and make the change themselves, because I would prefer that the 5 million people in this country rise up and make a change, rather than relying on that one person, like I talked about, the danger of the leader, the danger of the savior. Follow me. That can't happen. It has to be everybody joining together, coming together to fight really the real enemy here.
I think we're on the money here. And it's my personal opinion that I think the activists are wrong about looking for betrayal in people. I think the likes of Giorgia Meloni went to negotiate with these international, massively powerful financial bodies with a sincere attitude, but found it much harder to achieve her goals than she initially thought. And I think that that's going to be something for all of us making this challenge, is that when we get there, it's going to be hard. But I think that the top-down mentality is the problem. I agree with you on that, because Giorgia Meloni may be top-down, and the thing is, when you're on the top and you're there and you can't quite make it happen, or it's more complex than you imagine, that we've got this big financial problem where we owe these guys, Ireland owes these guys 300 billion, and they can turn off the tap to our whole economy if they want to. Or the industrial military complex can say, remember Northern Ireland? We can get that going again if you don't do what we say. I really do believe that we will be threatened. You know, that Giorgia Meloni will be threatened by this. Even our guy, who was the Enda Kenny, told us he was threatened, that the cash points would be empty tomorrow if we didn't go along with this. And I think that by maintaining this air of authority when you haven't got it, when you haven't made that challenge, you haven't challenged it, and pretending that you have, or you're doing it when you're not, I think that's Giorgia Meloni's problem. I think it was the Belarusian president, he just came out of the meeting and said, they threatened me. And I think the people will understand that and say, you know, we're nearly there, but we're having a really big problem. So I'm judging the activists here a little bit. And I'm saying that the accusations of betrayal are misplaced. I think that it's my opinion that people are sincere, and that the top-down authority structure isn't working. And I think that's why our people's movement is such an effective way to challenge this. And I think that we are seeing a people's movement developing. Do you think, Jana?
I do, and I think that people can have a choice. Everyone has a choice, and you can have a choice to walk around in a paranoid bubble trying to find criticism with everyone out there who's only doing their best to try to make things better, or you can take a leap of faith and say, actually, there are still good humans in this world, and there are still people who want to do good things without any hidden agenda, without any hidden motivation. They just want to do good. So for me personally, I can't imagine, and this probably goes from my childhood of having that optimism and life is good and people are good. I can't imagine walking around in a paranoid bubble thinking everybody's bad, everyone has a hidden agenda, the world is evil. I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning if that was my view. Yes. So for all the people that criticize individuals or grassroots groups or whatever, I would encourage those people to use, they're clever, they're obviously motivated, they're ambitious, they have a good skill set, is use that energy and that time to get up and do something rather than trying to point fingers at everyone else who's doing their best to make a difference. And if someone thinks they can do better, show us how it's done. Yes. I've had a lot of criticism with didn't like that leaflet, didn't like the opt-out letter, didn't like that speech, didn't like what her placard said. Well, that's okay. But if you think you can do it better, go out and do it. So get away from that keyboard, get away from that podcast, get away from that Substack, and get out on the street, take direct action, and do it better so we can learn from you. Spend that time and energy doing versus criticizing.
I think exclusion has a lot to do with it. We have been excluded. We've been rejected. We have been marginalized. And I think that has had a toll on us. You know, I think that marginalized communities behave in a chaotic way. And I think that we've fallen into that trap. We expect to be listened to no matter how rude we are. We lack ethics and we lack decency and morality in the way we do things because we are looking for order. I think that's what is going on with our guys.
It became a bit like one of my favourite books as a child was Lord of the Flies and the Anarchy, and it was just pure chaos and everybody, it was just very barbaric, and that's really how some are behaving now. It's just, you know, throwing stones at people and lacking good manners, decency and kindness and compassion for people. And we, the people in the freedom or truth movement, whatever you may call it, the people out there doing active work, we are the ones who, like you said, we're locked out of restaurants, locked out of theatres, cinemas, pubs and everywhere else and marginalised. How can the ones so marginalised be the ones starting to throw stones at each other? It does boggle the mind.
I think we have to create our own structure of ethics, or we have to get a decorum, we have to get order into the way we behave, because there's all this infighting, there's a lack of decorum, you know, there's a lack of dignity and statesmanship in what's going on. And this conversation is an important one to frame our aspirations in, because we need to get this sorted one way or the other.
I agree. And regarding all of the attacks I've had a lot of online abuse on social media. I've had personal phone calls with threats. I've had water thrown over my head, my car tampered with, other freedom fighters making all these ridiculous allegations. I've chosen intentionally not to give it any oxygen, because what oxygen will do to a fire is keep the flame going. So I've taken some great advice, particularly from the great girls and Lawyers for Justice, is just rise above it. Fight the cause, not the people. But I think this is a really good discussion today to actually give it some attention and oxygen to kind of clear up those allegations and then just be able to just move on fresh and
Let's
clean.
go for it.
Let's
go for it. We get into the juicy stuff now.
Get into the gossip. Everybody wants a bit of gossip.
I mean, look, let's start with the silly one. That you're a CIA agent collecting data.
I'm waiting for the paycheck, first of all. If I'm a CIA agent, I should get a wage. Collecting data, I'm waiting for a website. If anybody wants to fund a website for the Natural Women's Council, I can then do my newsletters and such. So I don't even know where that came from. I used to work for a small company that merged and was purchased by a larger bank, and then I got redundancy and left that bank. But certainly I was never, I don't even know where the CIA agent and data harvesting came from. I don't even remember where I heard this, but someone said they were doing research on my husband, and they were following him all over social media, and they found a comment he put on a greenhouse group. And the comment was about that we have a greenhouse that does have an automated watering system and an automated fan system, because we're both very busy. 2 small kids, I can't be digging and watering all day. And it was this information in the greenhouse feeds up to the CIA.
Okay.
So even my plants are put, my organic tomatoes
well, there's 2 right there. And, but I did a little bit of Googling, you know, no, I couldn't really call it research on agents in Ireland. And I could only find one in recent times, and it was one of the British intelligence agencies paid for a guy to come over to Ireland and infiltrate the Ross Point campaign. That was the Shell to Sea campaign up there in Mayo. And it kind of went a bit chaotic for them. The guy ended up getting into relationships with with some of the protesters and had children with the protesters, and now the protesters are suing the British state for being deceived. I mean, it's not really funny, I suppose, but it is ridiculous. The idea that there are multiple accusations of these kind of agents, that there's huge amount of money being spent on agents, because this must be 30,000, 40,000 an agent a year.
I can tell you where all the agents are. There are tax money funding all those 35,000 NGOs that cost $6 billion a year. Those are all the agents, but not me. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
We aren't. And another one that struck me was that I think it was about 10 years ago, the Irish Intelligence Agency funding, because it's actually declared by the state, and I think it was either 250,000 or a little bit more, and that's not a huge amount of money for an entire state, for surveillance and that kind of thing. I mean, it couldn't be much more than the telephone bill to Whitehall and the White House, you know. So I don't think that the guards really need agents to know what's going on with us. I think they know what we're doing. I don't think they've got much to worry about personally. I mean, I think we want to restore the Constitution, you know, we want values, and we want the law to apply. And it seems to be the government breaking the law most of the time, and we asking for the law to be implemented. So really we are those little boys and girls who wanted the state to be the thing that we hoped it would be.
Yeah, and most of us, at least most of my friends who are doing the work that we do it volunteer, we don't make money, we give a lot of time, we're tired, we're doing it late at night when the kids are sleeping, and most of us, we want to step off the rat race, we want to get off the treadmill. If I had a magic wand, my magic wand, if I could wave it, would be to let me live a peaceful, comfortable life, I'm a life coach, life and personal and business life coach, NLP practitioner. I want to start my business, I want to take my kids on holiday, I want to have a good night rest. This work that I'm doing is not on my long-term aspirations. I want the world to be a good place so I can step off the treadmill and live my life.
There's the accusation that your family is connected to the pharmaceutical industry, and that, you know, Big Pharma is sending people like you in to soften us all up. And I mean, you probably pay more attention to the accusations. Is that what the accusation is, or is it something? The
pharmaceutical is that a family member of mine in my house works in pharma, and that I'm linked to pharmaceuticals. And I sat back and thought about that accusation, and I thought, if I was very, very vocal during the COVID days, speaking up against the masks, the lockdowns. I printed 30,000 flyers about the children getting vaccines and spent most of my weekends handing them out to parents in GAA clubs and playgrounds. I've been very vocal about the feeling on those injections. I won't call them vaccines because that's not what they are. And I thought about it and thought, if my family or husband or friends worked in pharmaceuticals, and if I was benefiting from that, and I was going out pushing the PCR test and pushing the injection and you know, proactively pushing it to people, there might be a conflict of interest. But because I've actually spoken very vocally and campaigned against it at my own very personal sacrifice, there's certainly no conflict of interest. So what my family or friends do, even someone in my own house does for their employment, the fact that I've spoken up against some of that is definitely not a conflict of interest.
It's a problem that professional people tend to have, that, you know, you have a commitment to it wouldn't be an ideology, but it's certainly a perspective. You know, you've got real conflict within the household about, you know, work and those kind of things.
Yeah, and I also would say that, you know, I've always been a free thinker. I've always been independent in my thinking, and I've never been afraid to challenge anything even from when I was a young girl. And, you know, my family was very supportive of me challenging what didn't make sense. So I would say to any spouse out there, husband or wife, it's absolutely okay to have a different view, to speak your mind. You don't have to have groupthink, even in your own household. So the fact that I've have different views and I've been very vocal about that, that certainly shouldn't impact my character character or the integrity of the campaigns that I've run.
Yeah, totally. I always found that the people who were in the institutions had the most difficult jobs, especially the ones who were making the challenge. The guards, the teachers and the nurses within the institutions, they did such a great job of making the system unworkable to some degree. You know, if you have guards who stand by their bodily autonomy, you know, which they did, they're there. We might think we have it bad, but imagine being them, you know, and the conflicts that they must go through. But yet those people are the people that give us the biggest insight into,
absolutely,
you know, they're so valuable.
Yeah, and there's 5 million people in Ireland, and if we look at in our population, how many people work for those big finance, big tech and big pharma companies? It's an awful lot of adults between the Facebooks, the Twitters, Amazon, LinkedIn and all the pharma and everything. Just because someone's working there, maybe those companies at the very top maybe don't always make ethical decisions, and maybe they are part of the World Economic Forum and the global control. But the people working there, it doesn't mean they're bad people. And we have a lot of people that support our campaigns, mothers and fathers with children, who stand up against the gender ideology. Just because they work for a multinational doesn't mean you're a bad person and you can't join in. Everyone should stand for children, families, women of Ireland, regardless of where they work.
And I think hostility to the individual is a big problem. And those people have certainly felt the hostility, you know, but yet we constantly find that there are pharmacists, people who work in, say, TUSLA and these kind of things, who want us to succeed.
Yeah.
You know, it's so important that those people come forward and feel confident in approaching us. Well, they can approach you and me, Jana.
We have actually people working in my nonprofit who work in the health system, in the school system, in the library system. I have some librarians who have contacted me to say, you know, we are working to get those sexually explicit books because we agree with you in your campaigns. We are moving them by county from the child section to the adult section. That's fantastic. We have health workers who, you know, have spoken up against the, you know, in Crumlin Hospital, teaching kids LGBT when they're sick, and all the Rainbow Brigade. Though we need those nurses to speak up and the secretaries there to speak up. So they are working in our groups, and we need as many people, no matter where they work, to stand up and give us that insight. Absolutely.
And they're the people who are cracking the nuts for us. I mean, 100%. Those librarians who wrote to the Irish Independent 100%. And the rest of them, and they didn't agree with everything that we were doing, that some of us were doing, but they certainly made a big difference to the campaign. And this is where the media, mainstream media, had to, you know, that the narrative had to change, because there were people within the institutions who needed to be listened to, and that's one of the processes. We won't go into every accusation, Jana, but one of the biggest ones was the accusation, which I think that you volunteered the information, did you, that in your home place in Maine, that the village hall was a Freemason lodge, you know, and that and this suddenly came back to bite you big time.
Yeah, actually it was in my father, my late great dad, who passed in 2016. I helped him when he was very sick write his obituary, and we wrote his obituary from top to bottom. And he didn't want a funeral. He said, I want all laughter, no tears. I want it to be in the village hall with an open mic for everyone to tell a story and reminisce in a happy way about a memory they have of me, which we did and we honoured. But I grew up in a very, very small town which had didn't even have a pub. It had a shop and a post office, a cafe, and the town hall and a fire station. And the town hall was a Masonic hall, and that's where everyone has their, could be funerals, weddings, birthday parties, fundraisers, what have you. And that was where my dad's celebration of life was, at the hall. And a few months back, one of a woman who is in the freedom movement put out a really horrific Facebook post with my dad's obituary and his face on her Facebook post, which felt very violated by that, stating that, you know, Jana's a Mason, her family has Masonic ties. And then it came up a couple of weeks ago from another person who does podcast, again, my dad's face on the screen. So what I did is I contacted the Masonic Lodge, the head of the Masonic Lodge in the state where I'm from, and said, I would like to have you type me a letter to clarify that I'm not involved in the Masons, nor was my family, and what your hall is used for. Because that is one allegation that, although I've given none of the others any oxygen, my dad was a man of integrity, like me, a free thinker, and he would want me to clear that up and clear his name, because he's not here to do that. So I actually got a letter from the Masonic Lodge, and
which you
can certainly read that for people to see, and that can put that one to rest if you'd like.
Yeah, I think this letter speaks for itself. So, some people might say, well, look, you're giving Jana a very easy time on this. But I think, when you read the letter, when you listen to it, it's fairly clear, that what he's trying to say. Who is the person who's writing the letter, who responded to you?
The secretary of the local Masonic Lodge that can be rented out to anyone in the village, and it's used all the time on a non-profit basis to be used for the people in the town. Yeah,
so, and I remember going through the back of Australia on a motorbike when I was a young lad, and especially the further out you went, I wasn't used to seeing Masonic lodges, and I would come into a village just like you described, very small village with a church and a this and a that, and a Masonic lodge, and I found that a little jarring as I went through. But as I went through the next village, and there was Masonic lodges in a lot of them, and they were the village hall, and I think for anybody in Northern Ireland, they would have a very clear understanding. But for, I suppose, Catholic Ireland, it's a little bit culturally challenging, I suppose. And, it has a lot of legacy issues. But when you read the letter, which I have here, well, I'll just read it and then we'll talk about it afterwards. And I think we should talk a little bit about the Masons and who they are, and because it's not just that there are other people as well who have had these kind of accusations made against them. So it's from the Union Lodge Charity Fund. So the letter's dated 29th of August 2023, and it says, Dear Jana, thank you for your inquiry to the Union Lodge Charity Fund. Grand Lodge of Maine has contacted me concerning your dad's obituary. We are a not-for-profit fraternal organisation. We rent our dining hall to folks who want to gather for events such as wedding rehearsals, birthday parties, baby showers, fundraising for those who have experienced a catastrophic event, class reunions and such. One of our community functions is to provide our dining hall for gatherings of family and friends who have lost a loved one, as we did for your dad. I have been the secretary of Union Lodge for approximately 15 years. I know that neither you nor your dad has any membership in our lodge. The celebration of life held at our lodge was just a place to gather. It saddens me to learn that the uninformed would use this to discredit you or your family members. If you should need any further assistance, please feel free to contact me. Sincerely, Dale Flint, Secretary, Union Mason Lodge. So, I mean, what I hear there is literally that, you can nearly hear the tables and chairs clinking on the floor there as he's talking about this is a village hall. And he also says clearly that you know your father was connected to the Freemason horde. So it's fair, I mean, there's a very clear dismissal there. Can you challenge that really? Can anybody challenge that?
They can if they wish, but I don't know. I suppose what would people's concerns, like obviously myself and my dad were not involved with the Masons, but I was reviewing this issue that came up with a good friend of mine, and she said, well, so what if your dad was a Mason? Let's just pretend he was. So what? Does that define you? Does that make you not able to campaign or stand up? They know people whose fathers were in prison for terrible crimes. Does that define them and mean they can't stand up? No, it doesn't. But I did want to clear that neither my dad or I belong to any membership club or society at all.
I think that's a really good point, and I'd like to dwell on that, because the truth will condemn us all. We have all been deceived into some. I mean, for me, I was very much part of the permissive society of London, that those were my values. I rejected my Catholic tradition, and over time I saw the product of the degeneracy which developed, and I became aware that, oh my God, I did this to me, you know. But I learned from that, and I rejected those values, and I committed to a different set of values. I committed to different things. And I think that even if we were Masons, we want people to change from one thing to be another, don't we? We want people who were deceived by the agenda, which is not for their good, whether it be in terms of family, whether it be in terms of nation, or all the health stuff which is going on. We want people to wake up from the deception they have received, and we want them to learn and to be part of the solution. Isn't that what we want, Jana?
It is, and I think you know, there's a lot of people that have awakenings at different times. I was probably one of the later ones, only waking up, and the waking up is probably derogatory to people who aren't aware yet. So I'll say I became aware something wasn't right in 2020. And there are some people I know who have been aware for 30 years.
Yes,
I'm like,
we all
wow,
know
how
those
did you
guys.
know all this? And then I know other people who maybe they only really became aware the last month or two when they saw the school books that their children have. And some still aren't aware, and they're going through that journey. And we, as you know, people need to respect everyone's journey is their own. We can't be tyrannical and expect groupthink at all. That's what got the country in the mess. So we have to allow people to become aware or awake in their own time, on their own journey. And whenever they do, we have to welcome them to find the solution, not begrudge them because they were too late, or they got their shots and wore their mask. Put that behind you, draw the line in the sand. Everyone has a past.
Yes.
And that's one thing I focus on as a life coach. Everyone has a past. You cannot change that. All you can change is your present now, which shapes your future. That's it. So welcome everyone to be part of the solution. Don't feel threatened by people like you or me because maybe we were aware longer and we've been speaking out. Everyone, there's plenty of room on the playground. Everybody join in and become the solution.
All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
Wouldn't it be great to be perfect? Wouldn't that be just great? I'm certainly not perfect.
I think the word you used is defining people by their mistakes, by things which they may have felt at the time were right, but changed their minds and supported and became a champion of something very different. I think that's one of the most encouraging things that people can do, isn't it? For us, it's to see the worst of the worst, realize, oh my God, I've got this wrong. I need what you've got. That's must be the most encouraging thing that could possibly happen to us.
Yeah.
So wouldn't we want that, Jana?
It is, and I think there's a really good book that I read. It's a very short book. I recommend everyone read. It's one of those kind of life-changing books, The 4 Agreements. And one of the 4 agreements is don't take things personally. And every day I have to wake up and say that, because if you took things personally by speaking up with what we do, you'd never want to get out of bed in the morning. But the second is you can always do your best. And today's best might not be as good as yesterday's or tomorrow's, but every day you can only do your best. And before you go and judge someone else, you have to appreciate that they're probably doing their best. They don't get up out of bed that morning and say, I'm going to fail, I'm going to do a bad job, I'm going to do my worst. So respect that, really have that optimism and that trust in humanity that people are doing their best. Some are struggling, but they're probably doing their own personal best. Yeah.
I think the Masons is a weird one. And let me just clarify again, you nor your father had any membership of the Masons. So we're talking as outsiders. And we don't really know what they get up to. We kind of hear stuff and there seems to be different levels. My best understanding of it is it's a form of Gnosticism, which is something that people should pay a bit more attention to, because it pops up in a lot of apocalyptic stuff that has happened in the last little while. But it's like a lot of these international sinister bodies, we don't really know where this agenda is coming from. We're fighting it, we're challenging it, but we're challenging it with imperfect information, because they're not coming forward and telling us who they are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we kind of imagine, we think it's the Masons, but there seems to be something else with the maybe the Epstein Island stuff. I don't know. Is that Masonic? Is that whatever? I just don't know.
Yeah, I personally don't know enough about the Masons, because I always base my opinions and my views on data and facts or intuition. I don't really have enough facts, data or intuition, nor have I looked too much into it on what Freemasonry is all about. You hear all these things, but do we really know? Who really knows? I personally don't. But regarding the agenda, I do personally feel that I would understand a little bit about the Agenda 2030, which I would encourage anyone listening today to look up Agenda 2030, look up World Economic Forum, which is made up of the 1,000 biggest, richest, most powerful companies in the world. Look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. I think there's 17 of them, and they're all on a little rainbow wheel. Yeah. And if you look into the devil's in the detail, and you look into that detail, or the devil into those goals, what's happening today regarding everything from the LGBT to the One World Health, One World Government, lockdowns, totalitarianism leading from the top, it all is supporting those sustainable development goals. So 2 years ago, the World Economic Forum and all of that was a conspiracy theory. But now the WHO treaty, it's real. It's potentially going forward. All of the things on the sustainable development goals and the Agenda 2030 run by the global elites is what's pushing down into Ireland, because our government, I personally believe, does not serve the people of Ireland anymore. They're answering to the top down and the globalists. Whether the globalists are Masons or not, I can't answer that, but we do know that it's run by the global elites.
Yeah, that's one of our problems, is that we are challenging something that we are not privy to the information on. Our strategy as a people's movement, though, is a powerful... Is it a reinvention of tactics? Is it a new strategy? I think we need different strategies. Mm-hmm. The old strategies aren't working. They've co-opted them. We see the whole of civic society has lent its weight to the agenda. Mm-hmm. The trade unions, all the institutions that people used to rely on. We suddenly ended up with very little except ourselves. Mm-hmm.
And the government, there's not a democracy that people, democracy is the people feeding up, and the government, as I said a bit ago, is they're imposing policy versus inviting opinion. A true democracy is inviting opinion from the people pay the public servants. That is not happening. So we are not living in a democracy right now. We're living in totalitarianism or authoritarianism. And even the government likes to make people think that we're living in democracy by what they do is they have these citizens' assemblies, and they have the 35,000 NGOs which go out and make it look like they're the voice of the people. But what they are is they're government funded. I think it's 6 billion a year. There's 35,000 of them. They're government funded machines to go out to the people and make people think that they're part of the policy, but they're just pushing the policies of the government. So the first step for Ireland is to defund those NGOs. They're just a branch of the government using tax money to push policy that people don't want.
We've talked about the freedom movement, and we've framed as best as we can where we think we are with all that. We've tried to talk about creating some kind of order there. We've made an appeal to create an impression of competence, and that would be a real impression, so that people can put their trust in us. And I think that has to happen. I think that if we get it right, it'll happen very quickly. But then there's the left, then there's the government, then there's the NGOs and the press. To what degree do you feel that the press, the NGOs and the boots on the ground, the gay mafia, Antifa and all the rest of them, do you feel that the attack from the left, from the hardcore left, is something that affects you much?
It doesn't really, because whenever we've had an event or an assembly, or even last night's webinar, which was a bit of a car crash, they're so irrational. They have no logic. We might be speaking about child protection, and why would we tell a boy or girl they can be boy, girl, neither or both? That would affect the child's well-being. And then you see the far left across the road blowing their foghorns, their dog whistles, and shouting and screaming, trans rights are human rights. And I don't even think they realize what we're standing for: child protection and keeping a child's mental health and in good check. And they're shouting complete lunacy. So I don't get affected by that. I get a bit bemused, thinking the things coming out of their mouth to me makes absolutely no sense. I believe that some of those on the very far left are probably government funded. The NGOs are definitely government funded. I've seen flyers they've passed out spreading a completely mischaracterization of my nonprofit. I've seen the media spin things that are just unbelievable. A couple things come to mind about media. The Irish people, I think, are very quickly losing trust in RTE, which is a good thing. But regarding media, there was one event that really stands out. It was at the Swords Library. We did a peaceful assembly on the main street in Swords to talk about the SPHE curriculum. We then went down to the County Council to serve a second notice letter in regards to these pornographic, sexually explicit library books. We want them moved to the adult section. Then we went to the library in Swords. Now, the far left, it was a people before profit gang hanging out their pastel pink and blue flyers about us. They were standing at the Swords Library in a human blockade, shouting at us, blowing whistles, singing, and they just wouldn't let us through. They got quite aggressive. There were guards there because we let the guards know we're having an event, just in case there's some problems. We always let them know. And we wanted to go in the library, check for a few books, and leave. And this far left group of people before profit were so aggressive there that the guards were like, these two women want to get in. So they let us in past this group of raving lunatics, and we went into the library, looked for the books, confirmed that they weren't there, but they still were categorized in the child section, and then we left. It was a 10-minute in and out. And the county councillors at the Fingal County Council meeting raised a motion that the Garda let the far-right thugs spreading hate into the library, and it was a councillor, John Burchell from Mulhuddart, and he actually mischaracterized us that we're far-right thugs spreading hate. The Garda let us in. He was filing a complaint against the Garda. And we were two mummies going in to see if there were porn books in the child section. And then all the Facebook, Twitter, social media, news articles, everything was about these far-right dangerous thugs. And then the other event that sticks out in my mind is the Cork Library. There's some great people doing fantastic work in Cork. And I know these people well. And they were doing a peaceful assembly at the library, and the Cork papers, and I believe the Lord Mayor as well, spoke and said, we had to close the library because of these dangerous people. But there's video and photo footage of the library was already closed before the assembly even started. So it was a complete pot of lies, as well as every story that followed. So I think the first part in making a difference in Ireland is to get rid of what we call mainstream media and have mainstream become old media and build a new media so people get the uncensored truth as to what's really happening.
And that's what we're trying to do here, Jana, and we're not finished yet, so we've a bit more to do. But we've got to talk about where we want to go. What will our ideal solution look like? What will our future look like if we get what we want?
That's a very big question. What does success look like? So what success looks like is to have, whether it's a government or whether it's, I don't know if the government's the answer, but what we need is to get rid of the people who are writing and enforcing policies that the people don't want. So it's really to have a true democracy, a country led by the people's opinion, not by policies imposed on a top-down basis. So it's led by the people, for the people.
That top-down thing is coming up over and over again, isn't it? In some ways, Ireland is the sleepy cousin of Europe. Us and Portugal seem to be the last to work things out. Maybe I'm being too harsh. We have the potential to turn around very quickly, though. But the great thing is that in the UK, in France, in Italy, all the really big economies which international bodies pay attention to. You know, they feel like they're a little bit ahead of us in some things. I feel they are anyway, you know, that they seem to have more developed challenges to the agenda, the international agenda, than we do. I mean, I find that encouraging. I find that, you know, it's not just us, it's other people are picking this up too. Let's talk about what is the future for the Natural Women's Council.
Yeah, I would envision that what it looks like is that we do, once the world's in a better place, we can stop resisting. We all feel that we still have to live in hope that we can change the current system. Yeah. But what success would look like, what good looks like, is to stop the resistance and live in a democratic country that's safe and healthy for us and our children, and that we can work on bigger and better things like the natural health part of the Natural Women's Council, empowering women, being able to use my life coach skills to do podcasts and webinars for women to empower women and help them realize their worth in the home. You know, nothing irks me more than hearing a woman say, when they're asked, what's your job? Oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And I think, well, I've been a stay-at-home full-time mom for 8 years, and that's the best job and the most influential job in the world with my 2 CEOs that I look after. So it's really having women really understand and value their worth, but without taking that radical feminism approach, which I don't agree with, because we can't emasculate men and make men feel like they don't have a part in society. So really the Natural Women's Council is about empowering women, supporting families, but really appreciating that men and women both have really important roles in society.
Yeah, I think we have ideas. I think one of the things which makes me feel we're doing okay is that you see a complete lack of conviction in the politicians, the people who are in charge at the moment, certainly in Ireland. They're at a loss for ideas, and we're full of ideas. And we're full of ideas that can turn into initiatives that will develop momentum and shape the ethics and morality of our future. What crosses my mind there is that there are a number of different identifiable groups in going forward. What was the criticism that was around for Think Local? Now I'm talking about solutions in the future, and I'm going to go there, but we need to start by, you know, what with the Think Locals. There was some criticisms.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of criticism around Think Local. People were very cynical about the movement, and Think Local is not an organization at all. Think Local is a movement. It's a movement about building strong communities, resilient communities. The first one that we did in February, once it did happen, but mind you, we have a cancel culture in Ireland, and the first 2 hotels cancelled us because they received vicious threats from the far left. I call them terrorists because they terrorized venues and threatened their staff. We finally had it in February, and it was everything from food, farming, finance. It was really building those strong communities. And one criticism was that communities are communism, which I disagree with. I grew up in a very strong local community, and I have a community of friends, and I think a community is a vibrant, beautiful thing. I don't link a community to communism in any way, shape or form. So the criticism was what it was about. They thought it was very new age. We had a drumming circle booked. I love drumming. My kids love drumming. We had face painting for the kids. We had falconry booked. Now, sadly, the last Think Local festival and feast that we had was cancelled 2 hours before the event. It was cancelled, and that was a second venue. It got cancelled at the first, moved quickly to a second, and that got cancelled as well. So in the Think Local movement, we've planned 5 events this year, and only 1 actually happened because of 4 cancellations. And that cancel culture, I think, is a really big problem in Ireland. It quells free speech. People think, why bother organising an event if it's just going to be cancelled? And who is it getting cancelled by? Who's funding the people cancelling? Because the government doesn't want to know that they're getting cancelled. They kick it to touch. The Garda don't want to know about it. Nobody wants to know about it. And we get cancelled, and we're the ones holding thousands and thousands of euros in non-refundable deposits. Another accusation that someone made is that Think Local really wasn't cancelled the last time. It was a fake cancellation, and I think, wow, I really wish we didn't have thousands. They were holding a non-refundable non-refundable deposits, it absolutely was cancelled. So the other criticism was that our panel that spoke, which was the remnants of what was left of Think Local, we all had friends and family gather in a very small gathering. Instead of 500 people, we had about 30 or 40. That the panel who did the press release on the cancellation were foreigners. Now, a few of them have lived in Ireland 20 years, but they were English and they were not from Ireland. And then the other people on the panel, such as the film director James Patrick and Dr. Matthias Desmet, were not Irish. So we take that feedback on board, and hopefully we'll have another event and we'll make sure we do have Irish people on the panel, so it doesn't look globalist or foreign. But there were only 3 volunteers planning it: myself, an Irishman, and someone who's lived here 20 years but is of Arabic descent. So there's 3 volunteers that organised it. Sadly, the last one didn't happen, but hopefully we'll have more.
Well, there's quite a lot there, and I thought we were coming to the end, but actually we're starting again, aren't we? I think we should talk about that a bit. We should then talk about cancel culture, and then we should talk about what I think are the 3 different broad groups that are in the truth movement. 1 is the Christian Catholics, 2 is the pagan New Agers, and 3 is the ethical moral people, you know. So we'll talk about that later. But I mean, I was born in Scotland. Now, my parents are Irish, but I did notice myself, I think it's a good thing myself, because I have a perspective which somebody who was born and reared here wouldn't have. And I think that's a good thing, you know. There's a perception that the Irish are the 5 million people in the Republic. I think that is a fraction of the Irish people. I think there's the immigrants, I think there's the people living in the north, both the Catholics and the Protestants, there's travellers, there's different kind of groups. Mm-hmm. So I think that our perception of what Irish is certainly what I call the Free State perception is quite limited. I'm also seeing that we've got 2 groups, 2 perspectives on protecting the nation, on protecting what's local. And one of them is an ethno-centred ideology which says that everybody has to be, we should favour people who are ethnically Irish. And another one, which I favour, and which is in the Constitution, which is inclusive nationalism. My perspective on that is that globalism wants as many followers of globalism in the country, whether that be Irish people who don't recognise the value of their nationality and support globalism, or people who have come from outside who don't have a sense that Ireland, that their loyalty is to the nation in which they inhabit, that they have a sense of wanting to benefit that nation, that they want to be part of it, they want to be loyal to it, and they want to support it, they want to work for the betterment of it, they want to have an Irish vision and an Irish purpose in the world. So we need as many people as possible supporting the Irish nation and an Irish vision. And I think we need an Irish vision that people who aren't Irish can support and follow. And in that way, they are being as more use to Ireland than somebody born and reared Irish with 2 parents who doesn't really care about his Irish identity, who doesn't choose his Irish identity, that maybe sees themselves as a citizen of the universe, who wants to see a secular, multicultural, global culture here. That's just my thoughts, and it's not about me, Jana, it's about you. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think anyone that lives on the island of Ireland who lives here has a vested interest here, myself included, should be able to have a voice and speak up versus do nothing. I moved here almost 21 years ago, came for a 6-month work assignment that kept getting extended. And after several years as an expat, I had to make the choice whether to go back to the US or Canada where I worked or stay in Ireland. and I became a local hire here, where I had to release my ties to the States and sign my name on the dotted line to become an Irish employee working here, living here. I've bought a family home here. I have 2 kids who were born here 8 years and 5 years ago. And I've had people say, well, you're not from here, you're not allowed to speak up. Like, but I've lived here 20 years and my kids are here. You think I should just be gagged and silenced about what's going wrong? Why would I do that? So I think everyone that lives here who cares about this country should speak up, whether they're black, white, gay, straight, Christian, pagan, atheist. It doesn't matter. Everyone who lives here with their feet on the ground should feel that they have a part to play and should speak up and fight for what's right for the future for our children.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there are lots of people who are willing to do that and to support an Irish vision and purpose. And I can't see the sense in denying people an opportunity to contribute to the country that they live in. And I can't see the benefit of ethno-nationalism if you are, because all the globalists are going to work for globalism. The Irish that believe in globalism is going to going to support that too, as well as all the institutions, the international bodies and all that. I mean, how much can you stack up against yourself? If there are people who want to support us and want to support our vision and the Irish Constitution essentially, then please, let's do it. I mean, the Irish Constitution is inclusive from the point of view that you have an entitlement to Irish citizenship if you just have one Irish granny. So, you know, there is a place for people who are not majority Irish. There's also, I'm not quite sure how it works, but I certainly think that people who want to support the Irish benefit Ireland should be included in doing so, and it would be senseless not to. But there's one of the things there. I think moving on to, unless you have anything else to say that.
Yeah, just on the, I was accused of being, I put out a lot of social media posts about the mass immigration and the reckless open border policy, which I don't agree with. I was told I'm anti-immigrant, and I said, no, I am an immigrant, I'm not anti-immigrant. What I'm against is the government policy of wide open doors, 90,000 people coming in, unvetted, being dumped in every hotel in all the towns and villages, when many are not from war-torn countries at all. So although I believe everyone here should have a voice, I'm also against the reckless open border policy. So I'll just state my view on that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I find, when I was canvassing in East Galway, I found that the Brazilians, the Polish, and even the Africans, I was able to voice my policies to them, which was that we want integrated Irish communities, not mass migration. Yes. They had no problem talking to the Polish, the Brazilians and Africans about that, but I did have a problem talking to the Irish. And it does seem to be that we have a little bit of work to do there. Going on to who are we with Think Local, why shouldn't we have a bit of a drumming circle? Is there a good reason? I mean, maybe not everybody would like it, but I think it's very hard to say that you can't do them.
Now, if you want to drum. If you want to get your face painted. And if you don't, jog on and do falconry, or do, there was a Grow It Yourself workshop for kids, or do balloon making, or whatever else is out there. You know, you pick and choose, but what I think we get in the trap is, if there's a wonderful movement with 20 different things, just because you don't like one thing, you tarnish the whole movement. But you know, there isn't a one size fits all. And you know, I always heard the expression, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. So pick and choose, and remember to see the good in people, and don't live in that paranoid bubble. There still are good people in the world doing good things.
The Constitution of the Irish Republic is not a Catholic constitution. That's my I think it has God at its head, but I think it has a place for all the children of the nation. I think it implies that you know, people who don't see themselves as Catholic have the same rights as anybody else. I may be wrong on that, but I don't think I am. That's what a civic authority does. You are responsible for all the people. And often I found myself saying within the freedom movement, but those guys who oppose us, those guys who are ruining our country, they are Irish too, and we have a responsibility to them as part of our nation. We have to create a place that they can contribute to too. We don't want them working against us. We have to come to terms with them. And that's what a civic society does. So for us, we've got our Catholic Christians who don't necessarily agree with each other, the evangelicals and the Christians, or the Catholics, and there's branches within each of them. Then there's the pagans and the New Agers, and then there's the people who say, well, I don't believe in God at all, I'm just agnostic or ethical, or morality drives me. But for all those people, the pagans, it's about nature, it's about balance. The ethical, moral people, this is about truth. And I think the Catholic Christians can say that it is about truth for me too. Mm-hmm. So I think there are things that we can, I'm not sure we even need to unite. Is that what a people's movement looks like? Is it capable of representing a broad group of people?
I think you can come together where there's commonalities and you can align with certain things. Like if, for example, we are all against, let's just say, the transgender ideology in school. So whether you're a Christian or a pagan or a Catholic or a Protestant, is that one thing that every mother and father can agree on that should not be in schools? And if that's the one thing, the other differences I think have to be parked, and you can come together where you can come together, because that's where you'll get the strong grassroots movement and the numbers that are needed. We look at the water protest. What was there, 100,000 people got out to march against the water charges. But we talk about transing of kids and porn in the libraries, and we can hardly get 100 out. And only 4,000 parents, for example, did a submission to the NCCA regarding this coming into schools. Only 4,000. Where are the other 200,000 or 300,000?
Yeah.
We need the power of numbers to really get the traction. And, things I believe are going to get pretty hairy this winter. I think that, they're not at the end of this globalist agenda. They put in too many trillions and too many years investing in it. Look up Agenda 2030. They're not going to give up, and I think it's going to be harder before it gets easier. But if we can come together where we can, instead of fighting against each other and criticizing each other, we use that energy towards something positive, we have a hope in making it a better place.
Yeah, and talking about solutions, I think we have broad agreement on those policies. I think we have 60-odd% of people who support us. What do we do with the people who don't support us, Jana? What about the LGBT guys? Like, how do they live with us in our future world?
I think it's coming to, I think there's going to be certain views that people just are never going to see eye to eye on. But I think it's trying to understand each other, because there's members, and my group, the Natural Women's Council, and the other groups we work with are not against the LGBT community at all. We aren't against gay people, that people can live as they want, in their adulthood. But what we are against is sowing seeds of doubt in children's minds. So for the people who think or accuse us of spreading hate or being phobic, if they would just sit down and listen and look at our material and give us that courtesy of a conversation, or I've invited many times any of them to come for a healthy debate, to understand each other, there may actually be a common ground. Maybe they really would agree that we shouldn't tell a boy he can become a girl when they're in school. So it's trying to understand where we can, but also realizing there's some views that are just, you're never going to come together, but you still have to treat people with respect.
And there are some practices which have to be discouraged, which have to be punished. That's part of it too. There is a legal aspect to this, which is that child abuse is punished with prison sentences.
Correct. Yep.
And I suppose that's not really a negotiation, is it?
That's non-negotiable. And we've been regarding the library book campaign. I won't speak all day about it, but I surely could. We've been to several Garda stations, bringing in the child protection laws from the EU, the United Nations, the Child First Act of 2015, and showing sexually explicit material to children is a violation of the Children First Act and a process of a perpetrator who's grooming a child. Nobody wants to hear about it. So it's like the government, the media, the Garda, the Children's Ombudsman, everyone is kicking that to touch. Whereas child abuse, as defined in the Children First Act, should be punishable by law. But nobody is listening to us. So that's where we have to, as mothers and fathers, take the matters in our own hands and have those grassroots campaigns, because that's what will protect the children.
Yeah. About cancel culture, when I see the people who are the threat, you know, it's a freak show. You know, is this the best the state has? Is this what it was all about? You know, is this what Pádraic Pearse died for? You know, is this what the aspiration of the Irish nation? And it's not. But yet, those people hold a huge amount of power to intimidate academics, people in media. It's career ending to say the wrong words about these people. So these people, though they see themselves as victims, have huge power in our society. So how do we get the other side of cancel culture? It's a tricky one.
Yeah, that's the €1,000,000 question. Once we answer it, we'll book another event. But you know, you can be sure that any event that radical minority don't agree with, they will find the venue, they will threaten the venue, they do deep investigations into the venue owners and use their past as blackmail. I mean, these are really vicious attacks. Until someone from an authority steps up and says, okay, you're not allowed to threaten a venue, but venue, if you get a threat that is so bad that you must cancel these good, honest people who are in contract with you, if the threat is that bad, you have to report it to the Garda. Because none of the venues that we have been cancelled with have actually gone to the Garda with those vicious threats. They've simply cancelled our event, sometimes up to 3 or 4 days before, and left us holding all the non-refundable deposits and having to refund all the tickets. So unless we have the authorities, the government, the Garda on side to say, you can't cancel people anymore. Venues will keep doing it and we will be stuck holding the bill, and no one will ever want to hold another event. They'll just be stopped.
There's a couple of issues there. One is some of them do believe we're Nazis. You know, that's the accusation they throw at us. It's not something we recognise ourselves, obviously, but it's quite surprising and quite shocking, and that's the rationale they use for motivating people to do this. Is there a role for media in addressing that?
Absolutely. There's definitely a role for media to let people in the public need to know what these, I call them terrorists because they terrorize venues, they terrorize the public. They need to know that this terrorism is on our soil, and this group of the far left terrorists are getting events cancelled hosted by good people. There was one recently last week that was an event for 15 people about health and healing. Now, you couldn't get more pure than that. And this group showed up, 4 of them, to the venue's door with a portfolio on one of the people hosting the event who does campaigning for child protection, and made such threats to that venue that they cancelled them. And then they went on to boast about it on Facebook and Twitter. Well done, everybody against fascism. We've cancelled these guys. And you think about fascism, they're accusing people like us of being fascist, but their behaviour is actually fascist. Yeah. They call us Nazis, but look at their behaviour. They want to silence us, not let us speak, not let us have events, not let us have different opinions. So it's very inverted. They say it's black, it's white, it's inside, it's outside, it's upside down, really, isn't it?
Challenging those guys leads to confrontation, you know, and, you know, it's messy, and they will drag anybody who does challenge them face to face into messy conflicts. This may or may not be the road out of cancel culture, is that these terrorists will be confronted and everybody will get cancelled. And the more people that get cancelled, the more people that are accused of this, this and this, the more people that step over that threshold, because once you're cancelled, you're free. Actually, you know, you're not, the people who are going to ditch you are going to ditch you. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter anymore. But I think the more people that summon up the courage to say, I don't care, I'm going to say things which might get me cancelled if I believe them. On social media, all over the place, particularly the young, I think they may be in a position, the more people that get cancelled, the less of a threat it is, you know.
Yeah, and I think another solution for cancel culture is, we've talked about this with the 3 Think Local volunteers, is finding venues or buying a venue that will be ours, or a venue owner who will never cancel regardless of these really vicious threats they get.
Yeah.
So when you go into contract with a business for a venue, or maybe it's your own, you just know that it's going to happen. This event, this gathering is going to happen.
Yeah. So what would we hope for the people's movement going from here? I think, Jana, that we are getting some momentum. I think that there are a number of people and groups that are identifying that it has a bit of impetus, it's gaining a bit of traction, and that we could be going somewhere with this.
I think so. I think I would encourage everyone to get out and do something. Never underestimate the power of one conversation. So I've had people come and say, gosh, I can never give a speech, or I can never have my face out there in the public. I just couldn't do all the work that all of the grassroots groups are doing. And we have in our groups people who aren't out there speaking in public, but they're doing some back-end research, Freedom of Information Act requests, or others who are having that one conversation at the school gate or on the street, or in the pub or at church. So it's never underestimate what you can do. Don't think about what you can't do.
Yeah.
And see obstacles. Think about what difference you can make, however big or small. It's a lot of small differences that really make the big difference. And then the other thing I would say is, try to trust people. Try to realize that people in these grassroots movements who aren't getting funding are giving all their time and energy at personal sacrifice and getting a lot of abuse and threats from media, government, and other people on side, is try to trust people.
Yeah.
Try not to be critical. There's a form of criticism done in a lot of things do come from America. I don't know if this has or not, but there's a form of criticism in America called bad jacketing or snitch jacketing. Have you heard about that?
Tell me.
Bad jacketing is when people try to smear or discredit someone who's part of a movement. For example, you or me. They try to make people believe that their intentions are nefarious, they're not trustworthy, they're a snitch. And most of the people who are doing the bad jacketing are actually paid for by the intelligence agencies, by the government, to go and try to smear all these good people. And the classic cases of this was, there was a member of the Black Panther movement in the States who was assassinated because of this bad jacketing, and people thinking that they're a snitch and a bad character. So whether that's happening here or not, I can't say, but what I will say is, if you parallel the behaviors of people in our freedom movement or truth movement smearing others, the behaviors are parallel to what's done in the States, which is a very well-known tactic called bad jacketing. So just don't do it. It's not a good look.
One of the worst MI5 agents in the north, a guy called Steak Knife, you know, that's exactly what he did. And a lot of people were killed because of his ability to blackjacket other Republican volunteers. So there's a big history of it in Ireland, and I think people will understand exactly what that is, and you know, just how powerful a tool for evil that is. Finally, I think what we've got to consider is, if we get momentum, if we get support, if we're able to represent that majority opinion, and we can demonstrate that publicly to the institutions of the state through the democratic process, get people elected, get councillors, get TDs elected. We're on the final stretch of our challenge. You know, eventually we want to propose legislation to form it, and to create the world that we want to see. I have ideas about what that's going to look like, and I've expressed it earlier. I think it's going to be very, very hard.
It won't be easy, and I think there's some people that do have aspirations to go into the establishment, break it down, replace the people that are in there, which probably does need to happen. You know, there's people in there who are leaving a trail of destruction in the country. And then there's other people who I think, and I probably would at this point in time lean towards this, is build something new that's beautiful as well. So a few women in the Natural Women's Council and some teachers in the Irish Education Alliance, we've been meeting to talk about building a alternative school systems, so a home education network. And we've met with other people who have done home educating for 20 or 30 years in their lives. And, you know, there's so much happening in schools, for example. There's the transgender ideology, there'll be critical race theory, there's BLM, there's climate, there's all this indoctrination, which in my view will create a very dumbed down society of social justice warriors who don't learn to read and write and know history and art and music, but they'll end up just, you know, going down those indoctrination paths. So for some mothers like myself, we're considering building a homeschool co-op, whereby even for parents who both work full-time, you know, the kids could rotate around to different educators. So for solo parents or parents who both work, you could actually take your kid out of that mainstream school. So that's just one small example of, you know, in addition to stripping down the establishment on the inside and breaking that broken system down, it's also building back new and strong and improved for people who don't want to actually be part of that circus.
Yeah, I think that you can do both.
Yes.
It's not either or.
It can be both. You can pick and choose. It's like pick a mix, right? You can say, I like home educating, but the government policy on health might be improved, so that's okay. So it's, you don't have to be all or nothing. You can actually pick and choose what parts of society you want to be, you know, parallel versus part of. And schooling is something that, watch this space, there's a few good strong women in my group who are working on this.
That's right.
So.
You know, so much of what education appears to be messaging to children is, you are a scourge on the planet, you are born in the wrong this, that, or whatever.
You're the carbon we want to reduce.
Yeah, exactly. It's a terrible, terrible self-image for the children to have.
It really is.
You know, we can't keep on doing that.
No. So, and hopefully with Think Local, when we do, I say if and when we do another, which when we find a good solid venue, is teaching people even to live in abundance and grow their own food. Like I have a polytunnel, which does have an automatic watering system. Shame. But grow your own food. We're not going to live in scarcity. If the shelves go bare, but you can grow your own food, we'll be okay. So it's teaching people to feel like they can still survive and thrive in abundance without relying too much on a system that's broken.
Also trying to, maybe in a year or two we'll come back and talk about repairing the broken system.
Yes.
You know, when we have a little bit of authority and we have some ownership.
If the right people are in there, it doesn't mean just because the wrong people are in there that the whole system is bad. If we get the right people in there to rebuild the system, it may work again.
I believe in rebels and reformers, that you can work from the outside and the inside. And both of those two people are capable of creating change.
Excellent.